Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're calling from. My name is Charles Sterling. You know me because I do these twice a week. This is actually will be a pretty exciting topic for me because actually I was just telling Adrian, I am doing this session in Dublin. We're actually going to do CDSA and CDS for application. Sorry, there's a dollar in the cookie jar right off the bat. I haven't even gotten to the second sentence. I've already got a dollar in the cookie jar because I said CDSA. We've actually been talking about CDS for analytics and CDS for applications, and model-driven applications actually falls into that latter category. And I'm delivering a session on both of those in Dublin. So this is my primer and your guys's, and I'm looking forward to it. So Adrian, what I'd like you to do before I actually hand the microphone to you is go ahead and share your desktop because we're looking at you and your beautiful plum Under Armour. Oh, and there it is. Let's go ahead and minimize you looking at me. And now what we're doing is we're looking at the Power Apps portal of Build Business Apps Fast. Is that what you expect us to be seeing?
Yes, that's where we're starting off.
Outstanding. I would like you to tell us a little bit about yourself and what are model-based applications, and what are you going to cover today in this webinar?
Sure, sounds good. I'm a program manager with Microsoft, been here about 14 years, and I am on the Power Apps team. With the spring release, Power Apps has become the customization experience for the Dynamics 365 applications, and we're enabling people to build apps, a new type of app, the model-driven app, based on that platform. Expanding out from where Power Apps has been traditionally focused on what we call the Canvas app, where you're doing a very visual interface connecting with, hundreds of different connectors where you can mash up your data and create mobile, tablet, and web applications. With this talk, I'm going to be running through the model-driven editions that we do and doing a little bit of contrast against the Canvas-based app that you probably are familiar with already. So with that, I will jump into to the demo and running through that. Right now, we're inside of the Power Apps portal experience. And this is, if you have built Power Apps before, we're calling the Canvas app. This is the place that you would go and the experience you would see. On here, we have a series of different sample apps. And for the Canvas-based app, we have the Learn list, as well as what apps you've created in your environment. All of these things exist already. Some of what's happened with the spring release, we've done some work inside of the data area in that we've changed over the list of entities that we're using. We now are based on a core set or common set of entities from the Dynamics 365 platform, representing the most common things you would need to use starting to build out an application. And this area in here, I'm calling it out specifically because the Common Data Service for Apps, this area, is used between the Canvas app and the new model-driven app. So it provides a way that you can use the same entity, schema, server-side business logic between those two types of applications, and you can have experiences that start in one and go into the other. So one of the first things I want to talk about is in terms of environments. I have a list of environments that I've created and managing inside of here. And for me, I created a trial environment that I'm working out of today, where I started from the administration center, which is available from the Power Apps portal. That'll open up and show you a list of the environments that I own, and I'm demoing out of one particular one right now. So with this, I'm going to show one of the things that came with this spring release. We've added a switcher onto the Power Apps portal. Right now, I'm in the Canvas mode down in the bottom corner. If I go here and switch over to my model-driven mode, you'll see now the experience is very similar, but there's a few different style things to help you be aware of the different transition that we made. We have a similar navigation structure where we have home, which contains some high-level instructions and links to information about building model-driven apps. We have 3 different sample apps that are available, and there's a webinar that's going to be coming up by one of my colleagues who's going to drill through those in a little more detail, helping you to understand some of the templates that we offer, which are a great tool to help know the things that you can do inside. We've done a lot of different pieces of capability inside of those. Much like we've done with the Canvas-based app and their templates, these should help in the learning process. We have a Learn page that provides links to tutorials, the sample, the community, and the app set, where I'm going to walk you through today building a model-driven app, and it'll show up in this list. Right now, we see some of the the model-driven app samples that we have. And just to help orient what a model-driven app looks like, since many people may not be familiar with that unless you've come from the Dynamics 365 world. We'll start within the fundraiser, and we'll just go ahead and play that one sample app. So this is going to open up our player. The player for the model-driven apps is a different player than the Canvas app. We're seeing right now that I'm starting on a dashboard page that provides information about, the entities involved. This is an experience that can be designed. Off to the side here and is our navigation. Highlighting some of these things because I want you to understand as I'm walking through the demo of creating one where some of these elements come into play. So this is a fundraiser app. It's got the dashboard, fundraisers, and donations as a couple of the entities that are involved. From the dashboard, I can click on a given record and drill in and see information about it. This is a very responsive application, so that if I, pulled this out of the window, and you'll see as things adjust in size, the app reflows its information and to support, a variety of different desktop sizes, tablets, and down to mobile. And for these model-driven apps, there is also a player that's available in the respective app store that allows you to get an experience much like you have for the Canvas-based app players. One of the other concepts after the dashboard I want to highlight is our list or our view page that you go to. On here is a list of records, and you can have multiple different filtered lists, inactive and active ones. And from here, clicking on rows will drill into the edit form. So that gives you a quick highlight of the model-driven app and what some of the things look like when you're playing that experience. Now let's just go back to our Power Apps portal in the model-driven mode, and we're going to start building an application today. So the app I'm looking at is, we'll need a few custom entities, but we also want to take advantage of some of the entities that exist out of the box, because these are rich entities and the same ones that are used for Dynamics 365 or a subset of them. So there's a lot of, thought into the schema. There are forms and views and dashboards that are available for some of these. So it's a good starting point, but not all of your apps you need to build include that. So we're going to do some custom entities to start with. So we'll jump in and we'll start creating a brand new entity. The scenario I'm looking at here is I'm going to be managing a series of events, and the events are going to have participants, and they need to track the people that are signing up and what they're, have they registered, have they attended, collecting some information like that. We'll get a base set of the app ready for you. So we'll start with our event entity. And as I go into there, I see I got a field that was added for me, the primary name. Let's go, and I want to change that to something that matches when somebody sees the experience. We'll rename the name of the field on there. So these are just changing like the display name, the information that the user sees, and the name property, which is more the storage and kind of the programmatic side that you're dealing with. Okay, now I'm going to go and add a few more fields. Now the event will have a start date and time. We'll go here and pick from a list of different data types that are available. I didn't have to do that on my first field, the primary name, but as I'm adding each additional field, I have a choice of the field types I want to do. This one's date and time. There are some additional attributes that are available as you're adding these fields to the entity. We have some webinar coming up that's going to go a little deeper into the entity in terms of designing and more of these experiences. I'm just going to stick more to a high level run through. So we have that first field. Now we're going to go and add a couple of other fields. We want the event end, and that's going to be another date and time. We want to get some more information that we can track. So we're going to put a description on there. Let's throw a text area so we have a little bit more space in terms of the UI. And we want to add a location field. We're not doing anything fancy right now, so we'll just have a string so we can put some notes in there as to where this is happening at. Okay, with that, I have just created my new event entity with a couple of fields on there as a custom experience. Now, when this is saved in, we are going to now jump off to start on the second entity that we need. So I mentioned before that we're going to use some of the custom entities, this event one, but in the set of existing entities that we have, there are a number of ones that come out of the box that are going to be really useful for this scenario that we're running into. So we will jump over to our entities list, and inside of here is my contact entity. It's an out-of-the-box one. It's got a lot of fields and talking about a given person, where their address is, emails, phones. So there's a lot of structure that's really helpful. But I really didn't want to call it my contact entity with what I'm working on. So we're going to go ahead and call it participants. So I can rename some of my existing entities in the system, and we track display name and plural name so that we have the the right form in the context that you're in. So we'll go ahead and do that. We'll save our entity, renaming that one out of box from contact to participant. And now those represent kind of two of the major entities that I'm going to have inside of my application. The next step is going to be to jump back and create an entity that can help me relate these two together, because I wanted to have, for a given event, a collection of participants that are in there. So this one we're going to call my event participant entity to allow me to connect those together. I don't need to use the primary name field. It's not needing to be required in what I'm doing, so we'll just turn off the required field there. I want to add a relationship now from this entity. Let's go in and put a many-to-one. With that, I want to connect to participant, which was the renamed contact entity. There it is. And we'll change the name of the lookup field that gets placed on the entity itself. Okay, now that we have that, and if I jump back to my fields, you'll see that adding that relationship added the participant as a lookup field, a many-to-one relationship across. Now,
hey, Adrian, we didn't talk about when you want to do Q&A. Would you rather have it in situ? So one of the questions I was curious about myself, and I was talking to Hans Christensen out of Norway, is why did you guys go with the word entity instead of tables? Is it because of the additional value, like the business rules and the views and relationships? Or was there some other driver that wanted you to use the word entity instead of tables, or some other?
Yeah, we had done a series of usability studies.
Okay.
This is a great question because, when things like this come up, and naming is actually a very hard problem, we end up spending time going through user research and doing studies to understand what resonates best with users, as well as looking at other products and where we're starting from. In this particular case, entities was determined to be the one that resonated the most with the users. And it was fortunate because that's actually what it's called from the Dynamics 365 platform that we were rebranding as Power Apps for this experience.
That makes perfect sense. So
Okay.
Continuity of dynamics is certainly a strong
Yeah.
one.
Yep. And that's part of what we're doing here is, and I don't think I mentioned this earlier, this work pulling this in, this is an existing experience around entities and editing inside of Dynamics 365, but we're integrating it into Power Apps and improving the experience along the way. There are some minor changes that we're making as we're coming through in terms of the flow, but a lot of it is continuity and carrying us forward.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
So I'm going to go ahead and keep adding. I want to know on this one, is the person registered for there. And for that one, I want to get a yes, no option on there. So I've chosen my data type 2 option, and the item selection is the yes, no. And then we're going to go ahead and add one more. Did they attend the event? When we're looking back to see who ended up making it there, so we understand the amount of participants that we had. Okay, so we have those things added into our entity. We have a relationship. Now we're going to go ahead and save this particular entity. And this is going to be that piece that sits between event and participant, connecting the two together. So once I have my entity here, I'm now going to need to switch over and connect them back. So we were on the event. This one just has the list of fields that I've done, but I don't have any relationships yet. So from here, let's go in and add a one-to-many relationship. And we're going to connect it to the event participant. And the default field all looks good for it. So I have my relationship. Let's do save on that. And I will have my data model now created for the app that I want to do. The event entity has a one-to-many relationship with the event participants. The event participant then has a many-to-one relationship with the participant, which was a rename of contact. So with my schema all set up, I can now jump into building a model-driven app. So from here, we're seeing the list of model-driven apps. I showed you our samples that are there, but we want to add a new one into this list. So we're going to go ahead and start up our app designer. We'll name our app the Event Management app, and can leave the rest of the information as defaulting in. And now we're inside of our app designer where we need to pull things together. And there's a few things that are designed and pulled in based on the entities, forms, and views that come from those entities that I created. So the first thing is the sitemap, and that's our navigation. When I opened up the model-driven app before, there was a menu to the side that you could see the different entities that were there. We're going to go in and edit this and create our event management as an area. And we're going to connect in two of our entities, those two top-level entities that we have. We have the event in here, and we're going to add a sub-area for the participants. And that's entity and participants. Okay, with that, we have enough of our navigation structure available. We'll save and close, jumping back to our app designer. Now, you see the fact that I added my sitemap gave me two different entities inside of my list. You know, those are the two ones that are going to be from the navigation, but I also need to deal with the entity that exists in the middle, the event participant one. So let's go in and search under our entities list. I can now see the event participant. Clicking that adds it into our list over here. And so now I have my set of entities available to deal with. When I was in my sample app before playing it, I went through a place where I had a list of views showing the records that were there. So let's go ahead and configure one of the views for the event. I'm going to include active and inactive events from this list. Once I do that, you'll see them available in this pull down, and I can launch out to the designer. Now, along the way, I need to remember to save because I'm making some changes and I'm jumping between a couple of different designers to help build it. Now, this one that I opened was the active events view, and you see that as I expand the filter criteria, I can see what that is. I'm doing a status equals active. Now I could be changing this to things that are dealing with the the dates, so I can have ones that are in the past or ones that are in the future, and add a variety of conditions that help me make useful lists. But we're not going to focus on that one today, as we're just creating some a fairly simple, quick experience there. We're going to add in some fields: event start, event end, our location, and we can drop off this the created by field. So with that, I've now defined the view that I want to use within my application. We'll save and close. I need to do a view for my entity that sits between the two, because I'm going to end up using the event participant list and we'll start with that view as well. Launching out. Oh, I didn't do my save. Let's do that save there. And jump into now the view that sits between them. Let's go and add some of my fields that I need. I have the participant is the primary thing I need to be doing inside of here. And I have the registered and attended fields as information that I want. Let's remove the fields that I'm not going to need from this view to get it down to the right subset. So now I have a view that has participant, registered, and attended. Let's go ahead and save and close that view. And I now have the two views that I need for my application in play. Let's jump in now to our forms side of things so that we have the place where we can both view the data for a single record as well as add rows in as we go. So we're going to choose one of the default main forms. There are a few different form types in the model-driven app. The main form is where you do the majority of your work. The quick views allow you to have small parts of a form inside of a main form to see information. There are quick create forms that allow you to define a dialogue like for entering information, without going through the full form experience. But we're going to focus today on the main form experience. So I've selected that one. And I can now open up the main form for editing. This is our form designer experience, which allows us to choose from the variety of fields that are available, pulling them into this general tab. It started with 2 of our fields. Let's start adding in the event start, event end, location, and description fields inside. Now that I have the fields that I wanted, I want to select the group that we're in, and we're going to insert a subgrid inside of there to help connect us to the event participants form. And you'll see here under the data source, it's grabbed one of my relationships to give me the events participants already because I only had one primary relationship there. But if you had multiple relationships, you probably would have to pick which data source you're using on that. We're going to name our grid or our collection, hit save on that. And now you see that I have a grid placeholder down on my form itself. I think I have what I need on this form. And we'll go ahead and save and close. We also need to define where I'm doing the entry for that event participant. So we'll grab that form, and we're going to go ahead and do a definition on it. Save. Open up our main form for the event participant. Started with a couple of fields on there. What other ones do I need? I want to get my participant field. That's the most important. But I also want to allow the attended and the registered fields to be available while I'm doing that. So I think I have what I need on that form. We can save and close. And I think I'm back to the point now that I've defined the entities first, and I came in and did my sitemap. Set up the views that I want to see for both the event and the event participant. Under the participant and its form, those are all ones I don't need to do much about, although I probably could reduce the number of views because this is an out-of-box entity. It has a number of forms that are available. We can stick with, say, all contacts and active contacts for that. And in terms of the forms, we'll just use the contact form within our application just to narrow down the scope of this app. Now we'll go ahead and we'll save the definition of that and publish. Publish is a key step on this to make sure that you've moved from a draft status on what you're building to something that can be played as an application. Now, as we jump back to our model-driven mode inside of the Power Apps portal, I'm going to go ahead and do a refresh on this just to pull up the latest set of modeled apps, which should now include the event management. From there, let's go in and jump and do play on our entity or on our app. With that, you see now we're inside of our player. we are seeing, because I haven't defined a dashboard, you're going to go right to your first entity in your list from the navigation perspective, and you see events and participants. And so we grabbed the view for that first entity, and we have our choices of inactive and active views inside of that. Now I'm going to go ahead and create a new record for our events. And we get inside of this, and we're doing a session on getting started with model-driven apps. Our event is today. That all looks good, and we'll just adjust the time. And go ahead and save that. We have an end time. You know, that looks good. Get our time. We're ending there. Location. This is a webinar, so we don't have a specific location that we're doing, and I could put in a description if I wanted to. So we'll go ahead and save and close that event that that we're talking about right now. We have another event that's coming up. I mentioned before is the model-driven app templates, and that one is sometime next week. Nope, this is the time. I need to be editing the date. Down the road. Oh. There we go. And so you can pick your date, your time, get that information. This is also going to be a webinar that we're doing. So I can go ahead and save and close the event that I'm doing there. Now, I want to do a little bit more, information on these events as I've defined them. So we're going to go back into that getting started event. And you'll notice that as I do that, I have my subgrid down here that lists all the participants that are going to be attending the system, the event. So we can go in here now to the add new event participant so that we can put a person into here. We're going to use our participant list here. We'll add Jim, one of the sample users that was inside of the information that we have inside of this trial environment. He hasn't attended, but he is registered, so that's good. We'll save and close for Jim. You'll see Jim appearing down in the list. I can now jump back in and we'll grab another participant, Maria. She's also registered. Save and close. And you'll see now that the people that I have are all available inside of this subgrid list within the application. So I can also jump across to using my navigation and see my participants in there, which I was picking from. This is the full list. If I had people that I needed to add separately than the events, I can go through this part of my navigation, add them in. Our out-of-box entity, that I'm using, the contact entity here. As I drill into the information on them, you can see there's that entity has a lot of rich information and the form's already defined. I didn't actually have to create this form. Now, I could take and go edit this, take out certain information. If I extended this entity with some additional fields for our participant, I could then add them to the entity and into the form itself to really customize what you're seeing. But you see a lot of information in terms of the user's name, email address, contact information, that are all available as a benefit of the out-of-box entities and some of the metadata that exists inside of them. So that kind of goes through a large portion of our model-driven app. In some future webinars, we're looking at going deeper onto both the entity creation. We have Clay taking a look at that. We have another webinar coming up in the future that's going to talk about forms. I went through some of the simple cases of creating, the form, adding some fields and a subgrid, but there are more things that you can do inside of that platform. And we'll also go through in a future webinar around the dashboards and charts, in addition to a deeper dive on those sample apps that I'd shown on the homepage.
So, Adrian, can I ask a question at this point? By the way, mine and Casey's presentation next week is on the 19th at 10 a.m. So
19th. Okay.
you were almost there. 18th, 19th. What's a digit? What's an integer between fronts?
Thanks for correcting me.
Now, I think given 3 or 4 days, I might be able to do this with a Canvas-based app. Do you guys have a transition or a flux? At what point do you actually say, if you're doing this, you should probably be using Model. If you're doing this, you should be using Canvas. I don't know that I could have gotten what you just did in 8 minutes done on Canvas, but I might be able to.
Right. There's a lot of stuff because of the model-driven nature. You're doing configuration and using metadata. I didn't write any code as I went through any of this, and I have a rich application available to me. And there's a bunch of other things that I didn't get into that are still no code, low code, but a lot of configuration that you can do that define a system. Some of the differences between this and a Canvas-based app. This app is responsive. You do not get the same level of flexibility. To get the responsive, you don't have the same level of flexibility in changing styles and fonts and colors and placement. I chose that I wanted what fields in what order and in a particular section, and it took care of laying out all of that for me. If I needed to build an application that had harder requirements in terms of the type of experience that you might need for branding, or more customer-facing things that this type of application didn't meet the needs. The Canvas-based app, as a contrast, provides that flexibility that you get to design the entire surface of your application. Everything you get to pick, your navigations, the events, what's happening, the interactions, the flow. There's a lot more you can build as a focused task-based application using the Canvas app. But as you pointed out, Chuck, it takes a little longer to do some of those things. I pulled in 3 different entities. I was able to use an out-of-box form. There's a bunch of pieces that got started for me quickly, and with a little bit of configuration allowed me to build it. Now, one of the things about this, the model-driven apps, is its data. We're connected to the common data service for apps, which is available in both Model and Canvas. And that is the one data source that you have available. Inside of the Canvas-based app, you have a lot more flexibility to do mashups. There are over 200 different connectors that are available to pull in information between the two. So, they both complement each other. They are probably used in some different scenarios, and they have some different capabilities between them.
Daniel and Philip are both asking almost the same question. And I happen to have some context here. The app in the day training that we actually make available, I know that you're working with the guys to actually add model-driven. Is that the same walkthrough as what you did through just now, or is it a little bit different?
This is different, but there are aspects that are similar. I went through creating the entity creation would be the same. And going through creating through the app designer, doing the sitemap, doing forms and views and kicking off those things. Those are part of the app in the day that you're going through. What they're also doing in the app in a day that I didn't get into is they're also building a business process flow, which sits over the top of the form and allows you to configure the stages on how you move through, a typical business process to guide a user. That would be something to look at as another component of here. There are some other things beyond even the app in a day as capabilities to build some richness into your app around server-side logic. I think Clay is going to talk a little bit of that as he gets into the entity using the business rules that allow you to control validation, mandatory fields within the app that you're building. Now, those business rules are shared between Canvas and Model. The model-driven app can take advantage of both client-side and server-side business rules, where the Canvas app today just takes advantage of the server-side business rules.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. And I believe that app in a day, Samir is planning on releasing next Wednesday, I think. So actually the day that you had in your your webinar is the day that we plan on doing that. So Daniel and Philip, watch for that. There should
Yes.
be a tweet that I put out where you guys can actually, well, it's designed for trainers to deliver in classes. It's positively something you can do self-driven. I've done it myself a couple times. Philip goes on to ask, he's wondering if a good use case for model-driven applications is for OData feeds from D365. The refresh for OData is still very slow. Would this be a good use case for the application?
OData feed. So this is actually using the Dynamics 365. So the common data service for apps is a subset of the system behind Dynamics 365. I'm not showing it here, but when I create a trial for Dynamics 365, I can go into powerapps.com, and when I'm in my data for my entities, instead of seeing about 50 entities that are available in the common data service, I actually will see the full list of entities that are available. So when you're building an app from a Dynamics 365, you actually have these new interfaces as a capability to go in and do the customization. And it's all going back into the same instance because it is one platform. We now have Dynamics 365 apps built over this platform that's been rebranded as Power Apps.
Makes perfect sense. Anise and Casey have both joined us. Did you guys want to chime in? Otherwise, I'm going to hand it back to Adrian to go ahead and close. Neither one of them unmuted. Casey's with us. Go ahead, Casey.
Yeah, so just to piggyback on that a little bit, yeah, I mean, there's obviously still no data component with this. This is the same framework as Dynamics 365 customer engagement. So, kind of as we move forward, you can install apps on top of this as well. It could be your CRM system, service system. You can also, we have a set of connectors that will pull data right in from SharePoint, and we're continuing to expand that list. I'm not sure on each specific connector, but a lot of those use APIs, which can be quicker than the OData feed. And just the XRM framework in general has a very rich set of APIs. And so as we continue to expand, a lot of it will be low code, no code, or if you're a pro developer, you can definitely leverage those APIs to get data from custom connections.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, Casey. And Anise didn't unmute, so I'm guessing we're good for him. Adrian, I'm going to give it back to you to close. And I really want to thank you. Like I said, selfishly, this is exactly what I need for Dublin.
No, thank you for hosting me and giving me the opportunity to share what we've been doing. Really happy with the progress we have right now within the Power Apps and how we're improving the experience in terms of the designers and better integrating Dynamics 365 and Power Apps. Taking advantage of what Dynamics 365 had as a platform, its rich entity model, out-of-box entities, the designers they have, where I highlighted a few of them around app, form, sitemap, view, but they have additional ones in server-side business logic. There's a tremendous amount of capability that's being pulled together to both improve the Canvas-based app, especially on the server side, as well as enabling the new model-driven app type for business applications. And very interested to hear what people are building with it.
Yeah, thank you very much. And with that, it looks like I owe you, Anise and Casey, 2 beers. All right, guys, have a great day. And Casey, I'm going to see you next Thursday.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.